My morning started with the sound of pure chaos. Our HOA president, Karen Price, shrieking in the middle of the street like a kettle left on the stove until it forgot its purpose. And what had sent her into a meltdown? Her precious black Porsche 911. The crown jewel of her self-assigned suburban royalty was sitting in front of my house completely disassembled. Not damaged, just expertly taken apart like a luxury jigsaw puzzle laid piece by piece along the curb. The wheels were stacked neatly by my garage, the mirrors laid out like surgical instruments, the windshield gently propped against my mailbox as if it were waiting for a museum display. Neighbors gathered with their morning coffees, pretending they weren't witnessing the neighborhood's most satisfying moment of poetic justice. And me? I just leaned on my porch railing, took a slow sip of coffee, and said, "Morning, Eleanor. Looks like your parking privileges finally expired." But this wasn't random, and it wasn't vandalism. It was the climax of a long, ridiculous war that started the day she decided her Porsche deserved my driveway more than I did. If you've ever lived under a strict HOA, you already know there are two types of people in neighborhoods, like mine. The quiet ones who just want to mow their lawns and live peacefully, and then the clipboard tyrants who think a title makes them the neighborhood dictator. Eleanor belonged firmly in the second category. But before she barged into my life, like a storm with designer sunglasses, Oak Ridge Estates used to be simple: beautiful oak trees, calm mornings, and a peaceful driveway paved with stone pavers my late wife Marlene insisted on because asphalt looked sad. After she passed, that driveway became sacred to me. I kept everything exactly the way she left it. The roses she planted by the mailbox, the old bird bath she found at a flea market, and those perfect gray pavers we installed together. So when someone disrespected that space, it wasn't just inconsiderate. It was personal. For 20 years, the HOA was harmless, just a group of retirees trying to keep things tidy. But then came Eleanor, stepping out of her shiny Porsche like she was arriving at a movie premiere instead of a community meeting. High heels, stiff blazer, oversized sunglasses, and the attitude of someone who believed she was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company instead of the president of 37 houses and a sad little park bench. I thought she'd burn out quickly. I was wrong. The nightmare began with a letter taped to my Dormy Vintage 67. Chevy restoration was now unsightly automotive work. More letters followed. My recycling bin was visible from certain angles. My shutters were fading approximately 6%, and my lawn displayed inconsistent height patterns. It was nonsense, but I stayed polite. That all changed the Tuesday morning I walked out with my coffee and found her. Porsche parked directly in front of my driveway, not blocking it entirely. Just angled in the perfect spot to make backing out a stunt driving challenge. Her driveway was empty. Her curb was free. The guest spots were open. She chose my driveway deliberately. I asked politely if she could move it a few feet. She shrugged and said, "You'll manage," before shutting the door in my face. The next day, same spot. Day 3, same spot. But this time, she didn't even come to the door. She just spoke through her intercom, telling me it was legal parking and to stop wasting her time. That was the moment I realized this wasn't an inconvenience, it was psychological warfare. A power move. A message that she ran the neighborhood and that I was just an old man she could push around. But she didn't know me. I might be quiet, patient, and gray around the edges, but I'm not weak. And I'm certainly not someone you get to bully in front of the last piece of my wife's memory. A switch flipped inside me, not anger, but precise, calculated clarity. If she wanted a battle, she'd chosen the wrong opponent. For days afterward, her Porsche became a ritualistic display of arrogance, shimmering like it was posing for a car commercial while blocking my driveway. I even left a polite note on her windshield. The next day, I found it stuffed in my mailbox, balled up like a childish insult. Neighbors started whispering, Mr. Patterson shaking his head, Mrs. Clean telling me stories of how Eleanor had bullied them too, but no one dared stand up to her. Without realizing it, I was becoming the neighborhood's unwilling champion. One morning, after nearly clipping her bumper, I knocked again. She cracked the door just enough to look annoyed, told me I was dramatic, called my restoration truck junk, and slammed the door. That was the morning I called the police. The young officer sympathized but said she wasn't technically blocking the driveway. He walked over to talk to her, and immediately she transformed into a sugary, innocent angel, giggling and pretending she didn't know she was causing trouble. The next day, she parked even closer. Close enough that I had to fold my mirror just to get out. I took my concerns to the HOA meeting, only to walk in and find she'd beaten me there. Armed with printouts of fabricated violations, my recycling bin, my shutters, my truck, she turned the board against me, silencing anyone who dared defend me with a single cold glare. That night I walked home not defeated, but enlightened. She didn't play fair. She didn't follow logic. She wanted power, and I wasn't going to win this with arguments or bylaws. I was going to win the way I've won every fight life ever threw at me, with patience, precision, and tools. She had parked her Porsche in front of the wrong house, and she had absolutely no idea what was coming next. Eleanor wasn't just a difficult neighbor. She was the kind of person who twisted rules like wires, manipulated anyone too polite to push back, and hid behind HOA bylaws as if they were a personal force field. She'd honestly believed she was untouchable. But people who think they're untouchable always make the very same mistake. They underestimated the quiet ones. And I'm one of those quiet ones, the kind who has rebuilt engines from piles of rust and bolts. The kind who knows just how to take something apart so thoroughly that when you finally look at it, you can't even recognize what it used to be. So the next morning, when her Porsche sat gleaming in front of my house again, expectant, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. A cold, sharp, perfect clarity. If Eleanor wanted a long-term battle, then I was prepared to show her exactly how patient, skilled, and methodical I could be. She might have been playing checkers, but I've been a chess man all my life, and I had just made my first move. By day 15 of this absurd parking standoff, I stepped outside at 7:02 a.m. sharp, coffee in hand, already anticipating the sight that had become part of my morning routine. Sure enough, her Porsche sat so close to my stone-paver driveway that not even a squirrel could squeeze through the gap. There was a sick kind of consistency to it. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was ritual, a daily ceremony of dominance. But that morning, the scales finally tipped. As I carefully maneuvered my truck past her bumper, Eleanor strutted by with her tiny white designer dog, dressed in a pink sweater that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. She paused, watched me struggle, and flashed the kind of villainous smirk you only see right before a movie antagonist pushes a big red button. "Careful," she chirped sweetly. "You wouldn't want to scratch my Porsche." And she strutted off, holding that trembling dog like it was a trophy. At that moment, something inside me hardened, not anger, but resolve. The kind of resolve that doesn't shout or threaten, it waits, watches, and plans. And with someone like her, someone who weaponized bylaws and manipulated authority, the last thing I was going to do was react emotionally. So instead of snapping back, I calmly lifted my phone and took another time-stamped photo. Then I did the one thing a Karen never expects.
I followed the rules better than she did. That same morning, I called the non-emergency police line again. A different pair of officers arrived. A tall, tired-looking man with a mustache and a short, sharp-eyed woman with her hair in a tight bun. I explained everything calmly, professionally, showing them my growing folder titled Parking Incidents. I know how that sounds, but when you're dealing with someone like Eleanor, documentation isn't paranoia. It's survival. The officers sympathized but explained that unless she physically blocked my driveway, they couldn't cite her. "Document everything," the female officer advised. "If she escalates, you'll need proof." When the officers spoke to Eleanor, I watched as she instantly transformed. Gone was the smirk, the arrogance, the tyrant energy. She became soft-voiced, wide-eyed, hand gently pressed to her chest like she was auditioning for the role of concerned neighbor number one. "Oh, officers, I didn't realize," she said sweetly. "The curb is community property. My driveway is so inconvenient." A lie so blatant it would have made Pinocchio file a formal complaint. After they left, she sauntered past my yard and said, dripping with fake sweetness, "See, I'm not doing anything wrong. Maybe you should try being more neighborly." I didn't respond. Her arrogance wasn't the point. What mattered was the officer's advice. Document everything. So I did. Over the next week, every morning became part of the evidence-gathering mission. Photos, videos, angles, timestamps, the blue binder filled fast. Neighbors whispered encouragement. Mrs. Klein muttered, "Get her, Marcus." And Mr. Patterson grumbled that someone needed to stand up to the witch. But no one dared do it publicly. Eleanor had burned too many people already. And I didn't need cheerleaders, I needed proof. When I got fed up, enough to try towing again, the first company hung up when they heard the word HOA. The second declined politely. The third agreed to come. When that tow truck reversed up to her Porsche, beep, 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 it sounded like hope. The driver was a mountain of a man, and he asked me for authorization. I gave him everything. But right on cue, Eleanor stormed out of her house in neon pajamas and curlers, screaming like a tornado with vocal cords. She tried threatening the tow operator with lawsuits, revoked licenses, business ruin. I saw the hesitation. I saw her win. Again. The driver apologized and left. Eleanor crossed her arms and smirked at me like she had conquered an empire. "You should stop embarrassing yourself," she said. "You won't win this." Then she strutted back inside, victorious. But that moment didn't break me, it clarified everything. I couldn't beat her on her battlefield. She controlled the HOA. She intimidated tow drivers. She manipulated police. But there was one battlefield she had no power over, the actual law. That night, I sat at my dining table with a stack of bylaws, municipal codes, state statutes, and a pot of black coffee. I highlighted every clause about obstruction, harassment, nuisance vehicles, and safety concerns. And then I found it, loopholes, vague wording, little legal cracks she had never bothered to look for. Enough to build a solid case. Enough to give me the freedom to act. So I built my arsenal. I compiled evidence. I sharpened tools. I organized my garage like a surgeon prepping for an operation. This wasn't vandalism. This was non-destructive mechanical disassembly, something perfectly legal under nuisance abatement statutes if interpreted the right way. I drafted a formal letter citing every law I'd gathered, ending it with my favorite line. Failure to cease obstruction may result in removal, relocation, or partial disassembly of said vehicle as allowed by law. This letter serves as final notice. I mailed it certified, signature required, and watched Eleanor sign for it with total disinterest. Perfect. Let her underestimate it. Let her ignore it. That was my green light. For 2 days, her Porsche didn't show up. I thought maybe she'd finally understood. But then Monday arrived. At 7:23 a.m. I heard that familiar purr, smooth, smug, German-engineered arrogance. I lifted my blinds, and there she was. Eleanor pulled up slowly, theatrically, and parked her Porsche even closer to my driveway than ever before. She stepped out, adjusted her sunglasses, straightened her blazer, and then she stared directly at my window. A taunt, a challenge, a declaration of war. And she had no idea that she had just made her final mistake. Eleanor smirked before walking off, and I smiled. Not the smile of victory, not yet, but the smile of a man who had just been handed the exact mistake he had been waiting for. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited until the entire street went dark, until every porch light clicked off, until the psychas were the only witnesses awake. At 2:14 a.m., when the world was silent, I opened my garage. The rolling toolbox echoed like a war drum with every clink of metal and soft hiss of air from the jack stands. This wasn't revenge, it was engineering. Justice by way of grease and torque, years of mechanical experience finally finding a deserving canvas. Under the moonlight, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity, calm, steady, and unwavering. Karen thought power came from yelling, titles, and fear. Real power comes from knowledge, precision, and the quiet confidence of a man who knows exactly what he's doing. I approached the Porsche, placing my hand on its hood, whispering, "Let's get started." If she wanted to misuse the rules, I was about to use them. Better, and by sunrise, her precious car wouldn't block anything ever again. There's something almost sacred about a neighborhood at 2 Streetlights cast long shadows. The cicadas hum a quiet choir. The wind carries the scent of freshly cut grass from 3 houses down. Everything is still perfect. I eased the garage door open, rolled out my toolbox, and set the floor jack in place my trusty steel beast. Low profile, smooth, silent, capable of lifting a tank if needed. My aim that night wasn't punishment. It was a lesson to Eleanor that boundaries exist, that common property isn't her personal playground, that I was not a man to push aside with a clipboard and a fake smile. The Porsche glinted under the streetlights, glossy black, a German masterpiece, one of the finest machines ever built, and it didn't deserve its owner. Step by step, I worked methodically. The front jack lifted the Porsche with a soft groan of metal and hydraulic pressure. Jack stands held it solidly. Lug nuts spun off quietly with my modded impact wrench. Michelin pilot tires, black alloy rims, each removed and laid neatly on a padded blanket like art. Next, the frunk opened, the battery disconnected and placed aside. No alarm, no ignition, no electronics. Mirrors came off with precision, wrapped in microfiber towels. Panels, wipers, the rear spoiler bolts, all removed effortlessly, stacked carefully. The windshield, bonded with urethane, was the last challenge. Heated, sliced, lifted like a priceless artifact, not a crack in sight. The Porsche now sat skeletal, stripped yet intact, reversible, legal, a removable nuisance, but a message Eleanor would never forget. At 7:18 a.m., the universe's alarm clock triggered. Eleanor's door flew open. Robe swishing, thermos clutched, silk scarf perfectly tied. She froze, brain buffering, processing the impossible. Then the shriek, high-pitched, animalistic, echoing through the cul-de-sac. Birds scattered. Neighbors peeked. Cameras recorded secretly. I stepped out, coffee in hand, calm as any Tuesday morning. "Morning, Eleanor," I said. "Looks like you're missing a few parts." She screamed, "You psycho! You destroyed it. You destroyed my Porsche." I tilted my head politely. Destroyed? No. Wheels, mirrors, battery, windshield all intact, right by my garage. "You're welcome. Your repeated obstruction? You were warned in writing. Certified mail, legal citations, laminated copy if you like." Her response? A meltdown for the ages. "You're finished. I'm calling the board. I'm calling the police. You're done, old man." Hands clawing the air, stomping, shrieking like a child denied ice cream. When the police arrived, same 2 officers from before, the scene took their breath away. The skeletal Porsche sat on jack stands, a German luxury carcass. Eleanor lunged at them, shrieking, demanding my arrest, calling me unstable, dangerous, insane. The female officer turned to me. I presented the evidence. Laminated legal notice, time-stamped photographs, certified mail receipts, Eleanor's signature on the warning. She reviewed everything in silence, her expression shifting from shock toward impressed acknowledgement. "Sir," she said, "based on documentation, Mr. Jones issued multiple warnings, including a legally formatted notice." The tide had turned. Eleanor's meltdown was legendary, her screams recorded by curious neighbors, her power neutralized not through anger or confrontation but through patience, planning, and the precise application of knowledge and law. By the time the sun fully rose, her Porsche remained intact, but her arrogance had been fully dismantled, one careful, methodical, and perfectly legal step at a time. "He has removed parts of your vehicle without causing damage. This is a civil matter, not a criminal one. We cannot arrest him." The male officer coughed to hide a laugh. Eleanor's lower lip trembled like a loose bolt. "What do you mean you can't arrest him? Look at my car," she screeched. "I see your car, ma'am," the officer replied evenly. "But every action taken was reversible and documented. You were clearly warned. He acted within his rights under property abatement statutes." "You can't be serious," she shrieked. "He dismantled a Porsche." "Yes, ma'am," the officer said neatly. Behind them, neighbors snorted quietly, some trying not to laugh outright. I don't believe in humiliating people for fun, but even I couldn't deny the poetic justice of the moment. Eleanor, long the queen of the HOA, now powerless, standing in her robe, screaming at the law, with half the neighborhood silently watching. The officers left soon after, leaving her with one final piece of advice. If she wanted the vehicle reassembled, she would have to contact a professional mechanic, and we suggest resolving this civilly. When the cruiser drove away, Eleanor spun around, hissed at me. "You think this is over? You think you've won?" I sipped my coffee calmly. "I think I said your parking privileges have expired." That scream she let out could have cracked glass. Within the hour, a flatbed tow truck pulled up. The operator, a burly man who always smelled faintly of engine grease, nodded at me. "Morning, Mr. Jones. Guess what? She's doing round 2. "Round 2? I asked. "She sent the Porsche back to the dealership for a full rebuild," he explained. "New windshield, refitted mirrors, realignment, torqued wheels, even a complimentary detail. And she refused to pay." I laughed quietly, the kind of laugh reserved for men who know karma has a subscription plan. 10 minutes later, the Porsche, now fully reassembled and pristine, was chained to the flatbed and driven away. Eleanor watched from her window, silent this time. No screaming, no police calls, no frantic orders, just stillness. Something inside her had finally cracked. 3 weeks later, a "for sale" sign appeared in her yard. Agents and buyers streamed in, discreetly avoiding me, probably after hearing tales of the neighbor who dismantles Porsches. But the public record didn't lie. HOA minutes, apology posts, and whispers of misused authority told the story. Weeks passed. The sign changed to "price reduced, motivated seller," then "open house, all offers welcome." Finally, she sold at a loss, leaving without a word. On a gray Wednesday morning, a moving truck carried her things away. Eleanor, sunglasses shielding her eyes, paused at the end of the walkway, glanced at me, then disappeared into a black SUV. Peace returned. Life became calmer, warmer, and brighter. Kids played in the street again. Neighbors chatted over fences, and the new homeowners planted roses like the ones my wife loved. Simple joys replaced the tension Eleanor had imposed. I realized then, the fight wasn't about revenge, pride, or even the Porsche. It was about boundaries, respect, home, and keeping a promise to the woman I love. When she parked in front of my house every morning, she wasn't just inconveniencing me. She was disrespecting my memories, my sanctuary. Sometimes, protecting what matters most means picking up a wrench and teaching a HOA tyrant a lesson in power and responsibility. Now, I start most mornings the same way. Coffee in hand, sun rising, driveway clear, and the deep satisfaction that sometimes, just sometimes, the good guys win. Karma isn't loud or fast, it's precise. Bullies, tyrants, and petty dictators crumble not because you hurt them, but because they were never as strong as they pretended to be. Protect your home. Protect your peace. And never, ever let someone walk over you just because they're louder. Have you ever dealt with a Karen? An HOA bully? Or a neighbor who pushed you too far? Share your story below. I read every comment. And if you enjoy justice served with a side of humor, don't forget to subscribe for more HOA drama, epic neighbor showdowns, and stories of patience, planning, and triumph. And that's how the Porsche saga ended, with justice served not by anger, but by patience, planning, and precision. Eleanor's reign was over, the neighborhood could breathe again, and I could finally enjoy my mornings with peace, coffee in hand, and an empty driveway. Remember, standing up for your home, your boundaries, and your peace doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be smart. Karma isn't fast. It isn't flashy, but it's always precise. If you've ever dealt with a bully, a Karen, or an HOA tyrant, or just love stories of clever victories and justice served with a side of humor, share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe to Neighbor Wars HQ for more epic neighborhood showdowns, clever comeuppances, and true stories of standing your ground. Your next favorite HOA drama is just a click away.